The defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs have opened up the season 1-0 after that win against UT Martin. To get things started, I'm joined by our Georgia beat writer, Chip Towers. Chip, now Georgia faces Ball State. What are the biggest things you think the Bulldogs need to improve on from week 1 to week 2?
Well, that's an area that is always big, I think, from the first game to the second game. And, truly Georgia didn't play all that bad in their opener. I certainly share the sentiments of a lot of Georgia fans I heard from, and then they weren't as dominant, particularly early in that game, as certainly we're accustomed to seeing Georgia. Perspective's going to be hard to find this season, though. After winning the last two titles and 65-7 in the last game of last year. But they need to run the ball better. They need to play defense with better discipline, I think, create more turnovers. I'll tell you one thing that was way better than I think most people probably came out of that game thinking is I think the play of Carson Beck was actually just fine and really unconcerning for me at least, and certainly from Kirby, from what we've heard from him, he likes the way Carson played in the first game. So not a lot of great improvement to make, but a lot of tweaks and little things to get better on.
There were a couple of possessions early in that game against UT Martin that Georgia couldn't polish off the way I think a lot of people wanted. But you did see really the offense, defense, really everyone settle down a bit throughout the game. UT Martin did score a touchdown, but that was against Georgia reserves. How did you see Carson Beck settle in throughout the game?
He said a lot. He talked about it afterwards. He thought he settled in. I mean, he said he wasn't particularly nervous, but I mean, your first start in your career since he was in high school in Jacksonville at Mandarin High, certainly there had to be a little bit of nerves. But, I think if you look back at the first half of that game, it's 17-0 at half. Very easily could have been, probably, and certainly should have been 28-0. Carson and Dominic Lovett had a mix-up on a little slant that would have been a sure first down on third down conversion. Georgia ends up punting there rather than going down and scoring. And it was interesting hearing Kirby. We didn't ask him about it Saturday night about Georgia, running the football with no timeouts. On the goal line against UT Martin, they end up having to settle for a field goal there. You convert those to 7 in each situation. It's 28-0 at half, and I think that's what everybody would have expected. Those kind of operational things are the last things really to get zipped up once you start in the season. And basically with Georgia's schedule, two preseason exhibitions is the way it sort of sets up. I expect Georgia to be much more efficient this week.
Ball State lost to Kentucky 44-14 in week 1. What stood out to you about that game? And I'm sure there's going to be kind of some comparisons going into week 2 as far as how Georgia should, to your point, clean things up from week 1 and march out week 2 and take care of business.
Yeah, Georgia fans will want them to win at least 45-13, right? That would show improvement on both ends, show that you're better than Kentucky. Interestingly, Ball State is leading Kentucky 7-3 in that game, if I'm not mistaken.
Kirby Smart talked about that was a good first quarter showing.
Yeah. So that I think they carried that into the second quarter, and then it ends up being a fairly lopsided game. I think getting off to a fast start will be a huge priority for Georgia this week, just to sort of establish dominant such as they are. But, look, Ball State is going to be better than Tennessee Martin. They're a group of 5 team. They play these games every year. They have more scholarship players. So I expect Ball State to be a bigger challenge than Tennessee Martin was. And then Georgia. So, therefore, Georgia needs to play a lot better. I think you'll see the frontline players stay on the field a little bit longer. I also think you'll see a lot of these guys that set out the first game make their way back to the field this week.
Kirby Smart was asked if there was one thing that you needed to focus on the most, if there's one improvement you want to focus on the most going from week 1 to week 2, when everybody, including us, it sounds like, expect the biggest jump from your team, what would it be? He couldn't pick one. He's like, there were so many things. Third down, ground game. I mean, there were so many things. So I'm going to ask you the same question. Can you pick just one, or are there too many things to pick? And keep in mind, it's all relative. Georgia still won that game 48-7.
Yeah, no, it would be interesting to see the physical checklist that that the coaches have there, because they do, and there's never a longer one than after the first game. I thought line of scrimmage play was the biggest disappointment overall. I mean, Georgia's just inability to control the line of scrimmage and run inside simple lead plays. Georgia had to get a little bit creative to create some ground game, and getting a few more explosive plays. You did have a few, but not as many as you'd like to see against an overmatched opponent. Defensively, I thought Georgia was pretty tight overall, and I think you'll see them get tested a lot more this week. The secondary wasn't really tested. Tennessee Martin didn't really try to throw the ball, and quarterback run was their greatest threat. It'll be totally different. Ball State plays two quarterbacks, and they got kind of a run guy and a pass guy. So it'll be a much greater challenge. They'll have to play a lot better in all phases on defense.
Well, stay tuned to see how Georgia fares against Ball State this upcoming Saturday. Chip, thanks so much for joining me. Thanks to all of you for watching. Make sure you go to ajc.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel to find more videos just like this one.